Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is the Arkham Investigator's Wallet and accompanying scenario, The Dog Walker, for Call of Cthulu by the HPLHS Historical Society. Okay, first a bit of history. Released in 2023, the Arkham Investigator's Wallet is a realistic prop designed to be used with the Call of Cthulu scenario, The Dog Walker, which in itself is a 42-page black and white softback book. To the cover. Here we have a piece by Vladislav Yurasov that has a cartoony feel to it, but seems kind of appropriate, although the dog she is walking, Bigby, is like no basset hound I've ever seen. To the inside. Once we get past the credits and dedications, including to those four-legged members of the HPLHS Historical Society crew, we get into the scenario itself. There'll be spoilers from this point on, so stop watching now if you intend to play this. It advises that there are two different ways of playing the scenario, as a traditional group plus keeper, and also as a solo scenario that can be done via the HPLHS Historical Society website. It describes it as a sandbox style and that there is no right way to play it. The basic summary is that a 12-year-old girl, one Charlotte Foley, is walking a dog near Arkham Cemetery when she sees a man having a seizure. She makes for the nearest houses to get help and happens upon the residence of the investigators. Assuming they accompany her, they find the man gone and the dog nearby barking at something in the brush. A quick search finds the wallet. The investigators only have the contents of the wallet to help them find the mystery person. The crux of the scenario is a mystery revolving around a Yithian mind swap. It recommends reading The Shadow Out of Time by Lovecraft to gain a better understanding of what is happening, with those who have already read it probably realising quicker. 4 years ago, Gilbert Trask lived in Albany, New York, as a hood for the Tartaglia crime family. His boss, Joey DiVincenzo, himself a mid-level gangster, smuggling alcohol into the US from Canada. One night on an alcohol run, Trask suffered a seizure, crashing the truck he was driving. Upon recovering, he was quite literally a new man. He seemed to suffer from a kind of amnesia, with no memory of his friends, family and the like, also appearing to have an intellect far greater than the mobster thug of his previous life. Trask actually had his mind swapped with one of the great race of Yith. The Yithian was millions of years in the past, and Trask's mind was sent back, while the mind of the Yithian was sent forward. This is a common practice amongst the Yithians, and is how they gain knowledge on a first-hand basis. They stay in the body for a few years before being swapped back, all memory of it erased from the host. Trask went on to abandon his criminal past as the Yithian usurper began a quest for knowledge. Trask's former life has only two remnants, his mother and the mobster Joey DiVincenzo, who was punished severely for the crash Trask was involved in. Trask's new quest for knowledge led him to Arkham, where he studied vast collections at the Miskatonic Orn Library, keeping himself to himself. The time has now come for the Yithian mind to go back, and unfortunately Trask has to return. To make this transition smooth, the Great Race have kept a secret organisation to help them, the Timekeepers. Having received a sign of the transfer, one of the timekeepers, Walt Munro, was sent to swap Trask and the Yithian intellect back to their respective bodies. In order to do this, they use a device called a chronolytic capacitor, which is removed when the mind has been returned. The device is described as a queer mixture of rods, wheels and mirrors about 2 feet tall, 1 foot wide and 1 foot thick, with a central mirror that is circular and convex. The device exists to serve as a method of protection from the manipulation of the time-space continuum. Munro, having moved in with Trask, was completing the construction of the device and only needed a single component, a special convex mirror called Il Specchio. Unfortunately, Joey DiVincenzo has been looking for Trask for years, having never believed the amnesia story. He believes that Trask wrecked the shipment on purpose. The Tartaglia monsters sent goons after Joey, who beat him severely, knocking out some of his teeth and breaking his left kneecap, leaving him with a limp. Through gang connections in Arkham, a Danny O'Banion, he has finally found Trask, or at least the man he knew as Trask. He travelled to Arkham and has been watching him, waiting to enact his revenge. He was tipped off about the package being delivered and has stolen it, though doesn't have any idea what it is or why it's important. Due to the mirror being stolen, the chronolytic capacitor remains unfinished, leaving Trask in a dangerous position. His body doesn't quite have its own psyche in it, and the Yithian psyche has not fully left. Another danger, something called time worms, have started appearing. Should the investigators finally work all of this out, the ideal outcome is them making a working chronolytic capacitor to return Trask to his body without dying, or having time worms devastate their own timeline. More on those later. It makes the point here that should it be a single player plus keeper, then they should play Charlotte, a 12-year-old schoolgirl who has a job of walking dogs for people in her neighbourhood, which she enjoys. She has a love of Sherlock Holmes and imagines herself as a detective solving mysteries. The dog she was walking is a basset hound called Bigby that belongs to Hazel Maplewood. It's recommended that if the characters are using the pre-gens that Charlotte is one of the group and will plead with the grown-ups for help, though if refused she will just start investigating herself. Making the assumption that the players will be using the pre-gens, it tells us that they were attending a neighbourhood meeting at Madge Tomlinson's house at 729 South Power Mill Street, where a local Halloween party was being planned. Charlotte is eager to get help from them, showing the investigators to the cemetery path along Silver Brook. They find nobody there. The area has lots of trees and feels remote. Bigby can be heard barking with a successful listen roll and can be found sniffing around. A spot hidden roll will find a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles and the wallet. We then go into life in Arkham. The town itself has a reputation of being witch-haunted, something the investigators know about due to living there. This is due to the New England witchcraft panic in the 1600s. It's home to the renowned Miskatonic University, a home to a respected scholarship and vibrant academic community, though some of the academics here are considered in the fringe area. The university also has the celebrated Orne Library that has a famous collection of occult tomes. Arkham is considered quaint, having decent public transportation, and is divided in half by the Miskatonic River. The north side of the town is a bit rougher than the rest, as well as being more industrial, but it's still not that bad a place. Crime is not really a problem here, and the organised crime is kept to bringing in alcohol, despite prohibition, with the police seemingly happy to leave Danny O'Banion and his gang alone, providing they are not disruptive and leave ordinary people out of their business. Lucky Clover Cartage Company is a front for O'Banion. The investigators live in the lower south side neighbourhood, which is mostly family homes and has the Christchurch Cemetery. Okay, before we embark upon looking at the scenario, it's probably wise to show you the wallet first. It comes in this cardboard box from Arkham leather and is wrapped in red tissue paper. Let's unbox the whole thing and take a look. Aside from the wallet itself, we have two of the props, an automobile bail bond certificate and a New York driver's license. We also have a prop inventory and also a QR code that takes you to an Arkham Wallet page URL that allows you to get replacement PDFs of the paper props for you to print at home. Opening up the red tissue paper, we have the wallet itself. It says on the box that it's made of genuine leather, although it doesn't have that leather smell that we all know. It is loaded up with props, so by the magic of fading to black, I'm going to unload it and show you what's in there. Okay, there are a number of props that are required for the companion scenario. The following props are to be removed: the aeroplane ticket, the blank alcohol prescription, the Arkham Historical Society membership card, the Arkham Public Library card, the Arkham Transit Company transfer, the automobile insurance card, a Fenner's Roadhouse business card, a gun permit, a hunting licence, a Massachusetts driver's licence, a Miskatonic Athletic Association membership card, a Miskatonic University museum ticket, a newspaper classified ad, a newspaper horoscope column, receipt number 1 and receipt number 2. All snapshots other than the one of the lady with the cat are to be removed. There are also a number of optional props. Those are an Arkham Transit token, an Arkham First Bank cheque, the Arkham Bus Line schedule, and the fortune from a fortune cookie. The mandatory props are the Anderson Chemical Supplies business card, the B.F. Jones Hardware business card, the Pocket Guide to Arkham, the Automobile Bail Bond certificate, the New York driver's license, an Eye of Amara Society card, a remitter receipt, a Fleur de Lis cigarette card, a Grafton Diner punch card, a key, a laundry claim cheque, a lock combination, a Lucky Clover token, a Miskatonic University Orne Library card, some money, an appointment card for Dr. Mulig, a Walters Optics and Flash claim cheque, a Rare Books and Maps business card, a matchbook for the Red Herring Supper Club, a snapshot of a woman with a cat, a Worldwide Press Clipping Bureau business card, and finally a YMCA locker rental receipt. Don't worry if this seems a tad overwhelming, I'll explain what each prop is for as and when required. We have a section on customising the props. Some of them need to be customised. Without going too in-depth with it, certain props need names and dates filling in depending on whether you're using this set for something homebrew or following this scenario. Again, it mentions that there are PDF versions of all these props that can be downloaded and written on, just in case you don't want to use your set. So after this section we have leads. It stresses that the scenario is a sandbox-style game, pointing out that the investigators can proceed how they want, but that some avenues of investigation will provide lots of information and others won't. The first it mentioned is Abodes of Disquietude, an examination of the sanitaria of East Anglia. It is a book written in 1890 by Dr. Percival P. Mermer, and a copy is in Trask's locker in the YMCA. Being quite a long piece on treatment of mental illness in the 19th century, it seems possibly more appropriate that a 19th century scholar should be reading it. The book discusses how sanitariums were set up and treatments used, featuring a few case studies. A particular page is dog-eared, one about the Maltings Farm Sanitarium, directed by Dr. Jane Walker, and a nursemaid called simply Nan C, who suffered a seizure that resulted in amnesia, having total memory loss as to who she was and giving her both the physical and mental capacities of an infant, having no communication or physical skills. Within a few days she quickly recovered and seemed to have an intellect far beyond what she previously had. She became a voracious reader and even managed the business receipts of the hospital she was in. After 4 years, Nan advised it was vital as she constructed a strange contraption assembled from rods and wheels and reflecting glass. She received a visitor who contributed a metal stick and an odd-looking mirror. Not long after this, Nan suffered another seizure, and it came to a shock to Dr. Walker that Nan's old personality returned and her intellect diminished to previous levels, having no recollection of anything from the past few years, although she suffered nightmares where she had been trapped in a strange alien body with an alien mind possessing her own. She was treated with ice baths by Dr. Walker to help with this irrational belief, with the book being full of praise for this progressive treatment. It takes 1 or 2 days to read the book, though it's long and quite dry, with the dog-eared part being read in an hour or two. If anybody reads the book, they gain D3 in the psychology skill. If there is a circumstance where the activities of the Great Race can be connected to Nan's condition, D3 Cthulu mythos can be gained. The next lead is Albany. Trask still has old Trask's driver's licence from Albany, along with the address that he lived in until shortly after the accident. He just walked away from it and has a new tenant. With it being 200 miles from Arkham, investigating is a bit of a waste of time, though Trask's mother lives there. The Albany police can be contacted using the case number from the back of the bail bond. They can find out that around 5 years ago, Trask was driving Canadian whiskey to the US and crashed. He was found unconscious and taken to hospital, later arrested for transporting alcohol and reckless driving, though no charges were formally made. The notes from the investigating officer states that they believe that he was working with Joey DiVincenzo and by proxy the Tartaglia crime family. Anderson's Chemical Supplies is next. Their address can be found in the pocket guide, and it can be discovered that they mostly serve industrial clients. They won't give any information out over the phone, however, turning up with a photo of Trask can persuade the manager, James Dellings, to recall his visit. He remembers that Trask was after something called liquefied quantum ozone, which Dellings had never heard of, even speaking to their lead chemist, Christopher Bone. Bone remembers Trask mentioning something called the Schrödinger equation and the molecular Hamiltonian, along with some other strange talk that made no sense to them. As he wasn't with the business or the university, his visit stood out. He claimed it was for a project he was working on, and Bone will tell him that liquid ozone is rare and dangerous, even saying there's no such thing as quantum ozone. Beyond this, they have no more information on him. After this, we have the Diamond Credit Agency. This is located in Marsh Street, and Trask pawned a pocket watch here, never intending to come back for it. Due to Gideon time mastery, becoming wealthy is easy, so he didn't need the money. He pawned the watch as a signal that he needed the timekeeper to journey home. These allies of the Great Race monitor pawn shops for these signals, and when Walt Munro saw that it had been pawned, he started assisting Trask. Should they visit, they can find that the item is still for sale, and the owner of the shop, Randall Wade, is happy to show it to them, and they can buy it for $10, twice what it was pawned for. It seems quite ordinary at first, though if closely examined, a series of 12 symbols are noticeable around the dial. These can be discovered to be markings of the clans of the Great Race with a Cthulhu mythos roll. Also of interest is the fact that the second hand runs counterclockwise. They can research these symbols in the Orne Library. Should the investigators come across as aggressive or suspicious, Wade may even call his colleagues at Lucky Clover Cartage Company. There's a note that the HP Lovecraft Historical Society actually has a prop of this watch for use in game, however the second hand doesn't run backwards. We then have Dr. Mulig. His office is downtown in East Kerwin Street, though due to general patient confidentiality, getting anything from him will prove difficult. He will admit that Trask has been a patient for the past 9 months, and should the investigators manage to get him to talk, he can tell them that he finds him a fascinating patient, believing that he has deeply suppressed feelings about his mother, though he hasn't been able to get him to talk about it due to new Trask not really knowing anything about Trask's past. New Trask enjoys probing the doctor's mind. The doctor believes that Trask went through some significant trauma around 5 years ago in Albany. The receptionist, Carolyn, is much more forthcoming. Eager to please, she attempts to run the business side of the practice. A charm test can get her to reveal that Trask is a patient, and though not knowing much, she will admit that when he is in for a session, Dr. Mulig talks more than he does, with the doctor often being in tears when Trask leaves. After this is the Eye of Amara Society. They occupy a converted Georgian-era mansion in Lower South Side. It has a big doorman and is always locked, opening daily from noon till 9 p.m. Those carrying a membership card will be admitted, no questions asked, though with no guests. The doorman, Mitchell Murphy, holds client confidentiality highly and will not confirm if Trask was a member. Should the investigators get pushy, he will go and get the organisation leader, Jason Gaspard. He is a mystic with piercing eyes who will call the police if pushed. Anybody who manages to get inside will discover that it is essentially a clubhouse for the metaphysically and spiritually inclined. There's a seance parlour, lecture room and a private occult library, as well as a kitchen where refreshments for guests are made. There's a roped-off stairwell marked private to Gaspard's apartment. Should they have seen the chronolytic capacitor or know the term il specchio and spend an hour in the library, they can make a library use roll. Success means that they find a book called Dark Masters of Venice, which is about historical occultists in Venice, and features a drawing of a device that looks strangely similar to the chronolytic capacitor, also describing Melfi, a Murano glassmaker who was instructed by an angel to use mathematics to create a time machine of wheels, gears and rods, as well as Il Specchio di Melfi, a piece of flawless glass, even mentioning that the device will be called the chronolytic capacitor. We then have Gilbert Trask's house, a small place at 22 Brook Street. There's a map of it here. If the investigators visit it, they will find Walt Munro. He was meant to help new Trask return home by building the chronolytic capacitor, though the special mirror was not delivered. He found Trask near the cemetery and his body remains here. Munro is under a lot of pressure, knowing that the mind swap can end catastrophically if the capacitor is not present. He's trying his best not to draw attention to the house and will attempt to deflect any drama away, even claiming that he is Trask at a push, though he is unaware of Trask's wallet being missing. If they arrive within an hour, Munro will not be aware that the key to the basement is missing, recognising it if shown. To complicate things further, in a Model T Ford across the street, Joey DiVincenzo is waiting and can be seen with a spot hidden roll, a man with several golden teeth acting suspicious. Should he be approached, he will stand his ground and try to find out who the investigators are and what business they have with Trask. If questioned, he will say that he was hired by Trask to watch the house, driving off if police are sent. The inside of the house itself is fairly devoid of personality, with no photographs, art or personal touches. There's hardly any food in the kitchen, and the only unusual thing that can be seen is the flummoxer, an odd picture frame without a picture. More on that later. The next place of interest is the Grafton Diner. Found at West High Lane and adjacent to the train station, it is the only diner in town open on Sundays, and not the best at that. The face of the business is Bernice Whaley, who is always smiling and on duty. If she is shown a picture, she will recognise Trask, remarking that he always dines alone and nobody knows his name. We then have the Jones hardware store. This is located in the merchant district and managed by Ben Jones, who lives above it. Ben would recognise a photo of Trask and recollects boasting to him that they stock everything a man would need for the project and that they could order it if needed. Trask asked about a 9cm rod of iridium, then awkwardly pretended he was joking. We have a box out here on the main antagonist of the piece, Joey DiVincenzo. A mid-level criminal that used to be involved with the Tartaglia family in Albany, he's been searching for Gilbert Trask for the last 5 years. Trask, as we know, had a seizure behind the wheel and crashed the truck, and was subsequently taken to hospital with amnesia. Joey's reputation was in tatters and he was severely beaten by goons of the Tartaglia family, knocking out a lot of the right side of his teeth and damaging his knee. After the tip from the O'Banion gang, Joey was told that Trask was in Arkham and spending a lot of cash to have an item shipped from London, the mirror for the chronolytic capacitor. Joey, with the help of O'Banion's men, stole the mirror and has it hidden in his room at the Borden Arms Hotel. He's no idea what he has. He wants revenge on Trask for the wreck, a beating he received, planning to get Trask alone and prying his teeth out and breaking his leg. Luckily, he can be bought off for $250 and will leave Trask alone. Also, he has a young daughter that he's left behind in Albany, and he has a soft spot for girls. He may be cruel, but he would never hurt a child. The next place detailed is Lucky Clover Cartage Company, or LCCC for short. They're involved in the illegal movement of goods in Arkham and are located at West Main Street in the Merchant District and are run by Danny O'Banion, the head of the Arkham Irish mob. They have an illegal poker game and betting operation, and Lucky Clover tokens are a kind of currency in the underworld, for example to gain entrance into the speakeasy or to avoid a mob beating. Trask hired Lucky Clover to handle the shipping of an antique from England to him, believing them to be legitimate. They gave him a Lucky Clover token as a thank you, though he is unaware of how to use it. O'Banion's accountant, Mayor Goldert, noticed that Trask's name was on a list that Di Vincenzo was interested in, to which O'Banion informed Di Vincenzo of this. Subsequently, O'Banion's men tipped him off about the delivery and made sure it was handed off on October the 5th to him, the day before it was meant to be delivered to Trask. Should the investigators visit LCCC and ask questions, they'll be met by Eddie Leary. If they want to hire them, he is happy to help, but anyone asking what they do will receive a very stern warning from him, and if they persist, they may even get hurt, though flashing the Lucky Clover Cartage Company token may help things along. We also have a box out on Danny O'Banion here. It points out that he is the leader of the Irish mob in Arkham, and that he has connections to the Diamond Credit Agency, as well as other criminal gangs throughout New England. They've been looking out for Trask as a mark of respect for Joey. Investigators are unlikely to get an audience with him or help from his gang unless they work out how to use the Lucky Clover token. The average Arkham citizen has a 30% chance of knowing what the token can be used for. We then have Mrs. Trask. Should the investigators look into the Albany City Directory, they can find the home of Etheline Trask. If they manage to speak to her, they find a heartbroken elderly woman who is happy to chat to any of Gilbert's friends. After the crash, he thought he was getting better. However, he checked himself out and ran away, and she has not heard from him since. Shortly after, a rough-looking man with gold teeth came calling, asking about him, but due to his absence, she had nothing to tell him. Though she loves Gilbert, he was never a good student, preferring a life of drinking and smoking to one of learning. The cat in the photo, Hissy Fit, died in 1916. Moving on, we come to the Orne Library. Trask used to visit this place a lot. It's in Miskatonic University, and the investigators can speak to senior reference librarian Mrs. Henrietta Cole, a petite woman in her early 40s. She will recognise Trask from photographs, saying that he has been visiting for the past year and is a voracious reader, devouring books quicker than anybody she knows. He usually reads books on Roman history and the occult. He applied for access to the rare book room, though the head librarian denied his request. If they asked to speak to the head librarian, they referred to Professor Henry Armitage, a man who has been embroiled in numerous amounts of odd events at the university. If asked as to why he denied Trask's request, Armitage will say it was based on intuition. Armitage is actually familiar with the mind swaps performed by the Great Race, and should the investigators talk with him about Trask's situation, it may even give them a degree of clarification on the timekeepers, chronolytic capacitor, time worms, and Trask's return to his own body. Should the investigators look into Il Specchio di Melfi, they can find out that it is Italian for the Mirror of Melfi, and a successful library use roll can reveal that Melfi was a celebrated 17th century mirror maker from Venice. Should the investigators look into the symbols from the pocket watch at the Diamond Credit Agency, they can make a hard library use roll. If they succeed, they can find a pamphlet published 30 years ago by an archaeologist called Edmund Pickering Bowles, where he asserts that an intelligent pre-human race lived in Western Australia in the desert, and his evidence includes photographs of symbols carved in rocks there. 10 of the symbols match those on the rocks. Pickering Bowles died in obscurity in 1912. It then shifts to rare books and maps. This store is on Gedney Street, and should they ask about Trask here, the owner, Edward Tillinghast, will perk up. He was impressed by a list of books that Trask said he was looking for. 2 Latin texts, Flagellum Daemonium and Antiquatum Mecklenburgensium, and the third was called Abodes of Disquietude, an Examination of the Sanitaria of East Anglia. Tillinghast managed to find a copy of this in London, and when asked why he wanted it by Tillinghast, Trask simply said, "I wish to read it," an experience he remembers as strange, though memorable, also remarking that Trask paid for it with a $20 gold piece, roughly the equivalent of $400. We then have Uptown Laundry. This is on Gedney Street, and with the laundry ticket in the wallet, they can determine that Trask has 3 laundered shirts and 1 pair of trousers to pick up. The owner, Mrs. Mildred Briery, can also return something that was found in a trouser pocket that looks like a pen made of silvery white metal. A chemistry roll can determine that this is solid iridium. Walters Optics and Fancy Toys is next. They are based on West Main Street and provide film developing to photographers. Trask's claim check is in the wallet and can be taken to the office. if the photos are picked up, they seem a bit odd, being of strange geometric angles and lights. If they examine more closely, they look to be the inside of some kind of contraption, and in two of the photos, Trask can be seen reflected in the mirrors, pictured here. There is Worldwide Clipping Bureau, a company that holds discretion highly. Elliot Snow mans the front desk and is stern. Anybody being persistent enough can get him to confirm that Trask was a client, but they will not reveal what he was searching for. The last place of interest in this section is the YMCA. Known as the Y, it is located at Powder Mill Street in the French Hill neighbourhood. Possessed Trask discovered that he enjoys swimming here, something Yithians are unable to do in their normal form. He would swim a couple of times a week. The man on the front desk, Alan Carter, will chuckle if shown a photo of Trask, saying that he swims there regularly and everyone cracks up at his bizarre swimming stroke, commenting that he looks like he's drowning, but he's having fun. Trask has a canvas bag at his locker that contained 44 $20 gold pieces, as he believed it to be less conspicuous than the bank. Also, his copy of Abodes of Disquietude is found here. We then have a large illustration of the chronolytic capacitor. It explains that much of the building of it was done in the cellar of his house, which always remains locked, with the key in his wallet. The capacitor is an odd-looking object around the size of a small fish tank, made up of an array of rods, wheels and mirrors. If examined, it becomes clear that a part of it is missing, though it's hard to imagine quite what, though as we know it is the convex mirror, Il Specchio di Melfi. It appears to have no power supply and no controls. It's actually voice-activated and only a timekeeper can activate it. Okay, so now we move on to some of the key elements of the scenario. First up is Il Specchio di Melfi. It's a central piece of the chronolytic capacitor and a one-of-a-kind item made by a glassmaker called Melfi. He was taught the mathematics of how to make it by an angel, in actuality an emissary of the Great Race. Once it's installed, it smooths the time-space rift made by the Yithian transfer and prevents time worms. It's kept at the headquarters of the timekeepers in London, being sent out only when needed. This was an occasion where it was sent via a private shipping company rather than hand-carried by a timekeeper. New Trask's chronolytic capacitor is built and waiting for the mirror. After this, it details time worms. A risk of time travel is that a byproduct is debris in time-space that is incredibly dangerous. The worms are not actually worms, but appear worm-like. They're a kind of fifth-dimension matter, which when viewed on Earth makes them look like they're made from space. Seeing one is a sand roll, and if not repaired by the chronolytic capacitor, more worms will appear at the rate of 1 every d6 hours, and they get bigger each time. If they're physically touched, a power roll is made. If successful, nothing happens. If it fails, the living thing's consciousness is pulled into the vortices of time-space, causing a d20 sand loss. If the worm eats a living thing, it vanishes into the fabric of time. Living things can, however, be plants, trees and the like. If a worm is created, it's likely to cause attention, and other timekeepers will come to close the rift, as the Great Race do not want any interference. Then we have the timekeepers. The Great Race understands that the mind swapping is more likely to be successful if a non-possessed person is at hand to help. The organisation that deals with this is the timekeepers. They can assist in the building of the chronolytic capacitor and facilitating transfers and disposing of the evidence, as well as returning Il Specchio to London. They're usually rewarded with a glimpse of upcoming advanced technology or valuable information on the immediate future, allowing them to make big time on the stock market, though they have a vow of secrecy that they uphold. And lastly is the flummoxer. It is a Yithian technological device that looks like a picture frame of fancy design. It can generate an image on the front that will render a human senseless for 2d6 minutes and causes no lasting damage. If exposed, the character must make a hard power roll. If they fail, they're stunned, flummoxed and confused. It has a range of 15 feet, making it work as an inch check. This particular one only has 13 more uses left in it before it becomes exhausted and useless. Then finally we come upon the resolution. The actual Gilbert Trask is in danger, with his mind in a kind of temporal limbo that spans hundreds of millions of years. Should the investigators do nothing, his body will be damaged by time worms, making it impossible for him to return. Also, Joey DiVincenzo will find him and attack him, pulling a number of his teeth out and breaking his knee, while having to deal with the time worms. A bad deal for Trask, Munro and DiVincenzo. Munro is sworn to not reveal timekeeper secrets and will do his best to stop anybody working out what is going on. He will do what he can to protect Trask and the Great Race. Should he be pushed too hard, he will use the flummoxer against the investigators. Should their relationship be good, he may explain the absence of Il Specchio. The best outcome is making a deal with DiVincenzo and Munro to get the mirror back so that the chronolytic capacitor can be used to bring Trask back and drive the time worms away. Due, however, to the secretive nature of the timekeepers, he will likely attempt to flummox the investigators before removing any evidence of having been there and vanishing. It may allow the investigators to help in activating the chronolytic capacitor, though will flummox them afterwards. He will activate it with his voice, the machine will glow and wheels will begin to turn until they're rapidly spinning. They will start humming and then a pulse will start coming from it. This is reknitting space-time, and the time worms will dissipate. As far as Munro's concerned, the best outcome is Trask waking up in his own body after 5 years with no recollection of anything. The last thing he remembers is driving a truck loaded with Canadian whiskey in the border region. He will, however, be happy to have his wallet returned to him. Finally, it gives us some rewards and outcomes here, and a timeline of events from the Volstead Act beginning Prohibition to Trask suffering a seizure. After this, it gives us the dramatis personae of the piece and a prop list of what should be in the wallet in order to play the scenario as is. This is followed by 6 pre-gen characters, a simple map, and a drawing of the wallet itself. When coming up with final thoughts about the investigator's wallet, I found myself splitting the package into 3 distinct camps. The scenario, the wallet, and the extra props that are provided. The scenario itself is an ideal one for beginners as it's investigation heavy with little to no combat and allows the keeper to stretch their NPC chops by playing all the various characters of Arkham. It's a fairly gentle introduction to the system as it encourages the players to use the clues at hand in order to work out not only what is going on but also what to do when they find out. A knowledge of H.P. Lovecraft's work is fairly unnecessary to either the keeper or the players as pretty much everything is explained. The art is a bit scrappy throughout, and as mentioned previously, the dog is meant to be a basset hound and looks nothing like one. It's a tidy little adventure that could easily be done in one session, which makes it something that would be ideal for face-to-face convention play, as the wallet and the clues contained within take a load off the keeper as to having to explain the scenario. The wallet itself really is a lovely thing, and I am assured by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society themselves that it is made of genuine leather. The care and attention paid to the clues is absolutely what you would expect from them too. Flawless and completely convincing, and ultimately when the scenario is entirely played out, you could if you wanted to use it as your actual wallet. It has lots of pouches and pockets and is really well made. In fact, using it as a wallet for a few months before you ever intend on running the dog walker could even give it a genuine worn look that could make it even more authentic looking. Then we move on to the extra clues. As well as adding to the already fairly formidable array of clues that those who have a number of these sets have with what is meant to be used for the scenario, we also have an absolute stack of things that are not used and that could be easily repurposed for use with your own campaign in order for a more complete sense of verisimilitude at the table. Combined with many of the other offerings available from the H.P. Lovecraft's Historical Society, you have a veritable array of props to inspire you to use in-game for many, many situations that may arise. It's also worth mentioning that the places and streets in the scenario are also in the recently released Arkham book by Chaosium, dovetailing nicely with that official content. The H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society have already set the bar for in-game props, maybe a little higher than it has any right to be, and while not as vast and intricate as those in the Masks of Nyarlathotep set, and let's face it, that's going to take some beating in the long run, the Investigator's Wallet only adds to this legacy as it's fun, clever, extremely well made, and most of all immersive, and I believe your players, and in fact anybody you use the wallet with, will remember it for a long time afterwards. I give it a 9.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I'll put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon or even becoming a member of my YouTube channel. Bud out.